Welcome back. You're still watching DayBreak on this 26th day of May 2025. In studio I have Robert Mbui, who is the Member of Parliament for Kathiani constituency. He's also the Deputy Minority Leader at the National Assembly. Good morning, Mheshimiwa.
Yeah, morning, Sam, and good morning, viewers.
I have Senator Wakili Hilary Sigei, Senator of Bomet County. He's also the Chairperson of Justice, Legal Affairs, Human Rights Committee of the Senate. Good morning.
Good morning, Sam, and thank you for having me on the show today.
Great. And we're still expecting the arrival of Gadhono Mushomba, the Member of Parliament for Githunguri constituency. As soon as she joins us, she will be on set. This morning, you're waking up to the following stories of the Daily Nation and the Standard. The Daily Nation is reporting high varsity fees ruining our lives, and thousands of university students placed in categories that require them to pay hefty fees with minimal government subsidy. And a new funding model have petitioned authorities for review. But as they await their fate, the most desperate have been forced to drop out of college and others barred from sitting their exams. You could see the story continuing from pages 2 and 3. And they are talking about students complain of being barred from sitting their end of semester examinations for failure to pay their portion under the new funding model. And in 2023, the government introduced the variable scholarship and loan funding model, touting it as a solution to the ballooning university debt crisis. Students would be assessed using a means testing instrument and placed in 5 categories based on financial need. The most vulnerable, band 1, would receive up to 70% scholarship and a government-backed loan, with the family making a small contribution. But thousands of students have appealed their categorization and are on the verge of dropping out as they are unable to pay the high family portion of the fees. That's what the Daily Nation is reporting. And of course, some students have spoken to the Daily Nation and told of their fate, of what has befallen them. I was placed in band 4. The total first semester fee was 151,000. The government paid 60,000 to the college, while Helb and my family were each supposed to pay 45,000. Without the funds, the college told me to take academic leave 2 days before exams. I hadn't registered units. My parent had to borrow 45,000 from a Shylock to cover Helb's part so I could sit exams. And of course, saying that Helb didn't send the first semester money, leaving many students, including me, in a tough spot. It was a real psychological torture. That is according to a student by the name Grace Wangari, who is a student at Masinda Muliro University. That's one of the main stories, and I think we'll be having a touch on that a little bit. But also you see the other story that is on the Standard about a plot to stalk Kenyans. There's that amendment bill that has been presented to Parliament, an amendment to the Kenya Information Communications Act to institute. Let me just look at it. It's on page 6 of the Standard, and the details are that ICT experts warn new bill is a plot to snoop on Kenyans online. The bill proposes a billing system where each user would be assigned a meter number. Human rights activists say the law could be used as a surveillance tool by the government. Article 33 of the Constitution provides for freedom of speech and expression, and activists are saying the proposed law on internet usage could curtail these freedoms. These are just some of the stories that are making headlines in the papers. And on this particular story about the high varsity fees, I don't know, Mheshimiwa Mbui, if you have had an occasion to interact with the situation that learners are having to go through. And I think there was a recent decision by the courts that was staying a decision by the High Court, in essence, meaning that this new funding model can operate as long as students are given an opportunity to apply for revision of where they had been placed in the bands. What are you witnessing in your constituency?
It's a very unfortunate situation that our young ones are going through. And I keep saying that when you play around with education, you're playing around with the future of the country. I don't know what was wrong with the previous system where our youth, our university students would apply to Higher Education Loans Board, get support, and then they would go on with their studies. Now this new funding model comes into play, and the first thing that happens is that it's completely rigged against the poor, because I mean, there is no way that means testing system has worked, because they really do not have the ability to figure out exactly how much people are worth. And you've seen even in the issue of social health authority, they still get it wrong, because every time they attempt to use certain parameters within the means testing kit, either people give the wrong information, or sometimes the information cannot really qualify the ability of a person to pay. So I think it's really a problem, and our children are really suffering. And the education of this country, from the funding within primary schools, the funding in our secondary schools, the university funding, our children are really suffering, Sam. And I don't know exactly when we'll see the end of this. Otherwise, I think what we need to figure out as a country is how do we what do we prioritize? You watch news. I was just watching news on my way here, and you can see meetings in places like State House where people are dishing out handouts to musicians, but that at the expense of the education of our children. And some the musicians invited to be given handouts are those that are already successful, those that are known. 50 musicians from one region, and we are told, oh no, we are not politicking, we are not campaigning, but 50 musicians from a specific region, we are told we are not tribalists. Why are we calling people from regions? Why are we identifying people from specific places? I think the priorities of this regime are completely upside down, and that is where the problem is.
Senator, what have you heard from the constituents of Bomet?
Thank you, Sam. Let me first of all place context to why was it that the government of the day decided to try this new model. Remember, Sam, we all are products of education. For us to be where we are today, it's because at least we went to school, struggling through the process, struggling through the systems that were in place. One of the things that the government did, of course, was to implement the CBC program, and now the introduction of this new university funding model. The reason behind it was to ensure that we, I would call it sort of affirmative process of making sure that everybody who really deserves to be supported gets supported. That was the main reason. There is no way a government can wake up one morning and introduce a funding model that will disadvantage the vulnerable groups that it's actually desiring to support. And that is why when people challenge this process, and of course, challenging the process is normal. Kenya is a democratic state. People are entitled to do it. And the courts have pronounced itself. The High Court indeed said that this was a skewed funding model. There was an appeal. The Court of Appeal has said that let this process be stayed, let the pronouncement of the High Court be stayed in order to facilitate continuous funding, even as the case continues. Granted, Sam, this might not necessarily be 100% perfect system of funding, but at least it has also introduced an element of let those who are in need get it. The funding model could be a challenge, especially because of how we would feed into our details. I say so because when you look at, for instance, the SHA, where the system asks you so many things. You know, Kenyans, we've quite an interesting lot. If, for instance, I know I do not have any asset, or I know that I am living in a madhouse, sometimes we tend not to say it as it is. When you feed into that system, definitely you will be placed in a category that says, this is someone who has got a 5-acre piece of land. Unfortunately, that land could probably be your grandmother's mother. Father, sorry. We are a patriarchal system. So this model, well, has got its challenges. We receive those complaints. I can definitely confirm that even in my county, Bomet, there are people who are saying we've been placed in categorization that denies me the 70% plus that I would get from the government when I ought to have gotten it. I've been placed in band 5, where I'm required to pay more than what I can afford. And those are part of the teething problems.
So, those are not teething problems, Senator. Those are real problems, because, I mean, you're seeing that learners here are saying they have to drop out. They are being asked to defer their learning.
Teething problems are real problems, but there is a solution. And the solution is not plug and play. The solution is process. One of the things that the government is doing is also to ensure that people are sensitized on how to, even for instance, appeal. There is a process for appeal. When you've been placed in band 1, for instance, you are the lucky lot. If you are placed in band 4-5, you pay more. You are entitled to appeal. Appealing will guarantee you an opportunity.
You say that if you're assigned band 1, you're the lucky lot. Is it about luck here? Because, let me just explain this. Because the new funding model came, but as it was being introduced, there was also introduced new prices of courses. Medicine now being charged 612,000 at Moi University. So meaning, whatever band you're in, it's a percentage of a higher figure.
Exactly. Sam, remember, you know, this country is quite a very interesting country, especially when it comes to us dealing with issues. We are struggling with the crisis of our universities. Remember the debt and the position that a number of the lacrime of the universities, University of Nairobi, Moi University, they're in the verge of collapse because of the debt ratio that they have. And of course, part of it is the mismanagement. And the cost of education in Kenya is relatively affordable compared to other regimes or rather in other countries. You ask yourself how much you do pay, for instance, to go and study in the US or in the UK. It's too expensive. Therefore, this introduction of an enhanced fee is not necessarily to lock out those who can't afford. And maybe I might have used the wrong term, a lucky lot, when I made description of the fact that you're placed in band 1, where the government will pay you over 70% of the fees and you top up the rest. It is that same mean testing system that would assess the information you're fed into it and therefore places you in that band that you've been put in. It is not about luck, it's about the information that you put in there. And as I've said, there is an opportunity for one to say, look, I have been placed in band 5, this is my situation. Comparing it with whatever documentations and information fed into the system, you have an opportunity to appeal to the banding system that you fit. And in most cases, remember, we are all Kenyans, and we would always want to be supported in one way or the other. Appreciating the fact that there is an enhancement of the review process and the management style of the institutions that we are running and the cost of education, this is part of it all. Okay. And so this is part of the challenges that we are experiencing as we roll out this new model.
Sorry, you said something that university education in Kenya is not as expensive as in the US. How much is in the US for a program?
I might need to get on the specific facts, but for example, I know I've got my dear brother who went in there. First of all, even to facilitate an examination to get an admission to a university in the US, I need some good money. To prepare for purposes of traveling, for purposes of accommodation, for purposes of basically facilitating that student to study in the United States is crazy. It's in the tune of millions of shillings. That one is a fact, Sam.
But can you really compare Kenya and the US? Look even at their GDP. If you're to go to the per capita, you're looking at GDP per capita, meaning GDP of the country divided by the number of people or the population in that country. You're talking about 82,769 US dollars. That's for an American citizen. In Kenya, it is 1,952 US dollars. So the per capita of the US is higher than Kenya's by 42 times. Can you really even compare the cost of university programs in Kenya and the US?
And I want us to look at it also. The United States is over 250 years or so old. Kenya, we are barely a jubilee, just turned 50-something years after independence. So it is obviously expected that their economic situation and status is completely off.
And therefore,
us.
with that information, is it fair for you to price a program at 612,000 shillings, for instance, and load it on the citizen, knowing too well that previously the doctors that you have in our public hospitals today that went to school before this new model, they were educated through a totally different rate that the parents were paying?
Some it is fair for obvious reasons. You know, let's not also limit ourselves to the mindset that we say government is there to provide for us everything. Remember, you do pay taxes, and these taxes is only by those who are within the tax bracket. Cutting across, service delivery comes out of the government. It's also an opportunity for us to appreciate the fact that however much we know we have the role that the government is supposed to do, there is a contribution that we must make in terms of tax payment, in terms of contributing to this particular funding model, for example. So that some Kenyans do not see it.
Yet you're punishing students.
So that Kenyans
not able to pay for their fees.
Do not see it some that I sit back, I get sorted because I have a government in place. We also have a responsibility as Kenyans. And what we are saying is that it is not a punishment. And I do not want you to make it also so sensational that the government is punishing.
Senator, it's not sensationalism. Let me just give you a reference here. If you are called to study...
I have read this, Sam. You know, it took us through this...
That's not what I'm reading. I'm reading something else.
Yes.
If you're called to... Is it called? Or invited? Or offered
admitted
a chance?
To or enrolled, yes.
No, let's talk about invited to study a degree program in medicine. 612,000 shillings is what you'll pay for medicine at Moi University. If you are in band 4, you will, your family will be paying, let me get the figure. In band 5, your family will be paying 1.47 million shillings for the 6 years that you'll be there. In the same class, you have a band 1 student whose family will pay 183,600 shillings for the 6 years. And by the time they are finishing, you'll have that the total burden for the family, meaning the loan and how much the family will pay for band 5 student is 2.81 million shillings. So by the time you're graduating, you have paid 2.81 million shillings. For band 5, for band 1, it will be 1.46 million shillings. Of course, the huge chunk of it being from the loan from HELB. And Gadono Mushomba joins us also. She's the Member of Parliament for Githunguri. As you catch the breath, we are talking about the situation in the universities. And Mheshimiwa Mboi then, based on what you're hearing, but also what we know that has happened with universities, is it fair to expect that the new students, the young students, are the ones that are going to rescue the universities that have been struggling with finances?
You know, Sam, first, I think Senator Sigei is a serious optimist. Either that or is, as usual, Kenya Kwanza system of being very, not very generous with the truth. But I'm saying this because I don't know whether he's experienced what we go through as members of the National Assembly. Sometimes I think senators, and I'm sorry to say this here, but sometimes I think there's a little bit of a distance between them and their constituents. Some before this new banding system. I've been a member of Parliament from 2013. Yeah. And previously, we had struggles for education. But university students, when you would be able to do some fundraiser and raise about 40, 50,000, they were good to go for the year. Now, the system is so different because the expense is so high. And really totally unaffordable. But I don't know whether Sigei would understand this because, I mean, he's also a very lucky one. He says his brother goes to the to university in the US. Where would he know the struggles that other Kenyan parents are going through? But not to forget this, when he talks about the US, he forgets one very basic thing, that from kindergarten to grade 12, in US, public education is totally free. So how do you even compare? And you're telling us the US is expensive. It's totally free all the way up to grade 12. That basically means primary and secondary education in the US is free in public schools. It is not free here. It is, parents are still paying, and children are still struggling all the way from primary school, secondary school. Some, this regime and government tells us that they are supporting primary education. Do you know how much money that is given for a child so that they call it free education? 1,420 shillings per year. What is that going to pay for? You look at a simple school that has about 100 children, because some of our schools, because of this new system of CBC, junior secondary, they have run away from making sure all primary schools are providing junior secondary services. So some of them don't. So they have as little as even less than 100 children. Now a school with 100 children will get 142,000 a year. Even the watchman's salary, because every school must have a watchman, would be more than that. Yet they are supposed to also have activities. They'll be playing soccer, they'll be playing drama. At the same time, there's exams that they're doing every single, I think almost every term. So, I mean, some of these things are ridiculous when you listen to what some of our leaders are telling us. We have a problem as a country in our education system. We need to figure out how to sort it out. Exchequer needs to be released also on time. You know, I think you've seen it also in the papers. Yep. Our Kenya National Examination Council have said they haven't been given money. But like I said earlier, Sam, it's a priority issue. There is enough money for people to go out giving token, monies. Do tours around central Kenya and go dishing out 500, 1,000, 2,000 handouts to our people. But their children are in school, they are not going to, they're at home, they are not going to school. Our hospitals don't have medicine. What kind of regime is this? And
we will be talking more deeply about the budget 2025-2026. But Mheshimiwa Wamuchomba, talk to us about, because there appears to be a trend, and I've heard it being called defunding education, where you find that the government is stepping away from what it has been doing. If you look at the situation with the public universities, that is already taking effect. Previously, during the previous regime, you'd find that even students going to private universities would actually be funded with some bit of an amount, but also given loan. Now they can only access loan if they apply. What exactly is the thinking during this time?
Thank you very much, Sam, for having me this morning. My apologies, I'm slightly late. I come from my constituency. Yesterday was a Sunday, a very busy day for politicians, so I slept in my village home, so my apologies for slightly dragging. And a very good morning to my colleagues, Senator Sigei and my senior, Robert Mbui, MP for Kathiani, and my colleague in the National Assembly. Sam, it's very unfortunate that the government of Kenya, the regime of the day, Kenya Kwanza, have made our university students to become perennial beggars. Beggars who are begging for what is equally their right. And it's very unfortunate that even those parents who've already paid their household contribution within the new funding model, they're still going through a lot of punishment, in quotes, because it is like it is their burden to follow help for the other commitment. When I say this, I'm not speaking about, an analogy that I'm not familiar with, because as a member of parliament, I've had students come to my office who I sponsor through CDF, right. Fully means we pay for them the whole amount of money that was supposed to be paid by the household. And then they come back, like I think 2 weeks ago, they come back to me and tell me, we've been told that we are not going to sit for exam because the part that was supposed to be remitted by HELB has not been received by the university. And therefore, we are not going to sit for exam. Can you imagine? So this parent is asking me, where am I supposed to go? How do I start off with HELB so that I can follow up with their contribution because my child cannot sit for exam? So I followed this. And to my shock, one of the universities in my county had actually locked out 103 students from sitting for an exam in the morning, just because they have not received their HELB contribution. And so I had to intervene. I called the dean of students, I called the registrar of the university. I'm talking about Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture, because this is documented. And I asked Dr. Wanyama, so what are these students supposed to do? They have already paid their household contribution. Right. University claims they have not received HELB part. So are they supposed to be walking to HELB headquarters individually to go and follow up their contribution? And anyway, after much push and pull, the students were allowed to sit for the exam. But unfortunately, they had already lost one exam. So they have to do a receipt. So why are we taking through this a special exam? Yep. Why are we taking our children into this whole pain like it is begging. It's like we are begging the government to support these children. And let me tell you, when I talked about this issue, I even spoke to the VC of the university, Professor Wamboi Ngomi, and she confessed that they have been having a lot of issues. Let me tell you, it's only that most universities are not speaking. The amount of punishment and intimidation that is going through in the universities in the name of help must stop. So I'm wondering if really we are a serious government. I'm sorry, I am voted through the UDA ticket, so I'm part of this government. But really, if really we are serious, why are we bringing even issues of tokenism even to the university system? Going down to capitation, let's talk about capitation. I have a school in my constituency. I have schools in my constituency where I have confirmed that kids, learners were removed from NEMIS. They are no longer accounted for.
What do you mean removed? How?
Suspended from NEMIS, you know. Every school has its own portal where you log in and check your children whether they are listed in NEMIS. Because if your child is not listed in NEMIS, then it means you're not going to receive capitation per head of that child. You're not going to receive money for books, textbooks. You're not going to get activity fee. So I was surprised that in my constituency, I had over 311 students as per February this year that were suspended from NEMIS. When I followed up, it was shocking that was just an iceberg of the big problem. And that no wonder these guys are planning to run away from NEMIS and now want to introduce something else. Because if we really do audits and get to know what has been happening with that NEMIS funding, you'll be shocked. So 311 students, secondary day school students. I didn't even do boarding. I didn't even do primary. That was just day secondary schools. The highest number of students removed from one school was 157 learners in one school called William Ngiru Secondary School. And I have facts. I followed up as a member of parliament, went to parliament, and asked the question to the minister. Why are my students being removed from NEMIS? Why are you suspending children? And he denied. You know the law of parliament, the regulations of parliament.
Yeah.
If you claim something, you have to substantiate. Yeah. And I tabled a document to the minister, and I challenged him, can you go and check whether I am right? And he confirmed I was right. So if these students were removed in February, what happened last year? It means they didn't get their allocation.
So is it deletion or they have been moved to a different school? What happened?
It is total suspension. Total.
Was the reason explained?
Nobody has ever explained even now. And do you know now why they are panicking? They are panicking because they have already stolen money. That is money that was diverted. Because every child is supposed to receive some money. So if you suspended...
Stolen, diverted to where? To who?
Who knows? But that money was not accounted. Those children were not accounted for. Okay. And I wish we can actually do a national audit to every individual school in this country. Get to know the real physical head count versus the theoretical evidence, or rather data. All right. The theoretical means what is apparently supposed to be for that school versus the head count. You'll be shocked. So let me tell you, I insisted in Parliament that we must do a national audit on NEMIS. All right. We must account for every shilling that is supposed to be sent in Githunguri schools. No wonder there is a lot of panic. Now they want to move away from NEMIS, abandon NEMIS, and introduce a new system called KIMS, so that we do not follow... Inaitwa KEMIS ama KIMS? KEMIS. KIMS ni uchaguzi. Hiyo inaitwa nini? KEMIS. Kenya Education Management Information System. That is it. Before we move from NEMIS to KEMIS, whatever it is, can we do a national audit and account for every... I'm sure you saw what happened on Friday.
Mheshimiwa Mushomba, let's take a break.
Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. Before you take a break, last Friday, the Daily Nation had a story about one school that received 87 shillings. Shillings, yeah. For capitation.
87 shillings?
Yes. So are you telling me that school has only... Even one student does not even anyway get 87 shillings. Okay. So who is this who is sending 87 shillings in one school?
Let's take a break. We'll come back and find more about what's happening in the education sector. At the same time, as you talk about budget 2025-2026, the government plans to spend more than 700 billion shillings on education. That's on paper. We'll talk about that after the break. Stay tuned.